you lose that support from around you, and you kind of, lose the fizzle of like your interest in whatever art that you started off having interest in. But if you can find a way to keep the whimsy in it, then like you just have fun. That's what I tell myself, just have fun with it. It's not serious. You're not, it's not rocket science. You're not doing brain surgery. It's comics, it's cartoons, it's music. Have something that's going to create joy. Because if it makes you happy, it'll make somebody else happy.
Welcome to Overeducated and Underemployed Season 4. We've got a really cool episode today. I'm going to dive into the Word of South Music and Arts and Literature Festival, the history of the park that it's held at every year, Cascades Park. And I'm going to talk to you all about the different artists that have played over the years. We've got a bunch of clips, a bunch of photos. It's a much more visual episode, so I do encourage you to check it out on YouTube if you're on a audio-only platform. Most of the episodes this season will still be primarily interview-based, but I just wanted to let y'all know that I will be doing more visual cues, more photos, more video clips over the interviews in the editing process this season. If you're on an audio-only platform, you're not going to miss anything on the interview episodes, but there will be some added visuals if you check it out on YouTube, so I encourage you to do that. Now, Word of South is a huge festival that has happened for 12 years now, so I'm not going to be able to cover everything that's happened. I'm simply going to be talking about my experiences with the festival over the years. The scope of this festival goes great beyond what I will cover in this episode, and I highly encourage you to check out the fest in general. It happens in April and every year in Tallahassee. It's really the thing I look forward to every year, even more once Chuck Reese started curating a stage. Chuck Reese is, of course, the editor of The Bitter Southerner and now Salvation South, and he, for the last several years, has at least 8 years now, if not longer, has curated a stage at Word of South, bringing poets, musicians that we've had in Tallahassee in the last decade. So I just want to give a big shout out to Chuck Reese. I really appreciate everything he's done for the Word of South Festival. It's really, he's a big part of what I get out of it, and he runs a whole stage there every year. Let's talk about Cascades Park to start with. Cascades Park was originally supposed to be a park back in 1971, but it was found to be toxic because it used to be the site of a gas processing plant. The city of Tallahassee runs on gas power, and now it's natural gas, but back in the day, it was a type of gas that required processing. There was a gas processing plant in downtown Tallahassee, and it closed in 1950. They tried to empty for 35 years, including the old building. Now, in 2006, a grant from the EPA became available, and they were able to clean up the toxic waste from the gas processing plant on the site. And they made plans in 2010 to, or maybe a bit earlier than that, but they really started working on things in like 2009, 2010 to build an amphitheater in Cascades Park. Now, Cascades Park has paths all around it. It has drainage ponds. It's actually basically a drainage pond that they built a park around. They cleaned up the toxic waste. There's a playground. There's a Korean War memorial. And they really brought, there's actually, I think, a few different veterans memorials, but the Korean War Veteran Memorial is something that I actually did a little bit of work on back when I was a museum curator, because the whole community really pitched in to make this happen. So they used resources from across the community, and the museum that I was at was tapped to help them do research for the Korean War Veterans Memorial, and I did a lot of work on that for a couple of weeks. Even I got to contribute a little bit to the park, and it has a lot of historic significance. So not only was it this gas processing plant and it's now this park, but it actually contains the prime meridian of Florida, and it's what helped determine Tallahassee as the capital of Florida. Because back in 1821, when the Spanish seceded Florida to the United States and it became a territory, it had two capitals, Pensacola and St. Augustine. And neither one of them were really suitable for being a central location for business in the state. So they picked the halfway point between, and the rest is history. Now, there's also some really dark history in the park that I think needs to be acknowledged, and that's because there's a tree there that was historically used for lynching. It's one of the ugliest trees I've ever seen in my life, and there's a weird feeling you get every time you pass it. And I think it's significant that instead of getting rid of the tree, they turned it into a historic placard with illuminating the horrors and the horrible things that were done in Tallahassee historically. Instead of trying to just sweep it under the rug, they've also preserved a black baseball field, Centennial Park. There's a lot of historic preservation around Cascades Park. They've even recently renamed the capital city amphitheater to Adderley Amphitheater, named after Cannonball Adderley, who was from Tallahassee and is buried here. Word of South started pretty much right when the park opened. The first year was 2014, and it's been going ever since, except for in 2020 for obvious reasons. The thing about this festival I think that is unique is that it really combines music and literature and other art in a way that I don't see done very often. Earlier on, there were more collaborative types of events where there would be music and literature in the same performance. I think back to Lee Bains, who, of course, this podcast is named after one of his lyrics. I think back to his performance in 2016 with John T. Edge, where they played extended instrumental segments of their album, Dereconstructed. Lee Bains III and the Glory Fires did, while John T. Edge did spoken word over it, and they had a slideshow. And they needed someone to run the slideshow, so I stepped up and got to watch a show side stage and ran the slideshow for them. It was quite the show. Over the years, though, I feel like the collaborations have dwindled, but they've brought in more art and literature of other kinds, not just music, and they've really expanded the kinds of art that they bring into the festival. But they're more segmented now, I would say, like the music performances and the literature events, the panels and things like that. They're much more separated than they used to be. There are sometimes panels like this year where you'll have a musician conduct a panel with authors. But in this case, with Danny Bedrosian, and we'll talk about this a little bit more when we get into this year's event. With Danny Bedrosian's event, he's also a comic book and history book author. While he is also obviously a musician, if you've watched his episode, you know his story. If you haven't, I highly encourage you to check it out. But the thing about the fest now is I feel like there's literature events and there's music events, because even with that event, it was still a straightforward literature event. Danny played a little bit of piano at the beginning to set things up, but overall it was just a literature panel. So I do like the collaborations more, but I also know how much work went into that John T. Edge, Lee Bains III collaboration, and how much of an ask it can be for some of these people. And I think it was probably a decision that they made at some point to simplify the events themselves and focus more on getting a wider array of artists. Now, over the years, they've built a hotel on site, which has provided a few more event spaces. It's also provided a place for everybody to stay and hang out afterward. I think there's been a lot of gentrification of the area, and there's been a lot of stuff that has been lost, but I do like what they're doing with the things that they've built instead. That being said, I'm not really here to talk about all of that so much as I am to talk about the festival itself. Over the years, and I'd like to just also point out that, like other festivals, it's impossible to see everything. And as I mentioned earlier, I'm just going to be talking about my experiences with the festival. But over the years, I've seen everybody from the Avett Brothers to Jason Isbell, Lee Bains, Patterson Hood, and David Hood. Let me talk about 2018 for a minute, because back in 2018, Chuck Reese brought David Hood, Patterson Hood, John Paul White. We had Spooner Oldham. We had Funky Donnie Fritz, and a whole slew of Muscle Shoals musicians. And they played a set covering the songs of Eddie Hinton. I've never seen anything quite like it. It was really special. I don't really understand how Tallahassee got to be so lucky to have such a thing happen here, but it was phenomenal. And it really spoke to the way the whole community pitches in for this event as well, because there was a storm that day, and this event typically, like we've talked about, takes place at Cascades Park, but they moved each stage to a different venue in town. And so a bunch of different local businesses offered up their space and hosted the events that were supposed to be on different stages in Cascades Park. And obviously it was good for those local businesses too, but I just thought it was a really nice way for the whole community to pitch in and make sure that all these artists had flown in from all over the country and sometimes all over the world to be here. And it was great that we were able to find a way to make it all work. That performance was absolutely astounding. Patterson Hood played a solo set, and he played 21st Century USA for the first time ever. And then David Hood and Patterson Hood and Spooner Oldham and Funky Donnie Fritz and John Paul White, and I think there was some other guys there too, and I can't remember all their names at this moment, but they had a little band, a little supergroup of these legendary musicians playing Eddie Hinton songs. Now, Eddie Hinton was a soul singer who really never got the recognition he deserves. There were some cover EPs or singles that were put out about 10 or 15 years ago. And the Drive-By Truckers, Patterson Hood's band, did a cover of a couple of their songs. I don't know that anybody had ever done a tribute to Eddie Hinton quite like that before. And it was one of the most phenomenal things I've ever seen. And I wish I had video footage of it, but I wasn't really doing that kind of thing back then. I did happen to get video of Patterson playing 21st Century USA for the first time. So you can check that out on the YouTube channel. That's up and available for you to watch now. But I did not film the David Hood, Patterson Hood, Eddie Hinton cover set, unfortunately. There are some pictures that I've been showing you here as I talk about it, but that's just not something I was doing. I think there is some video of it available somewhere. And if I find it, I'll put a link in the description of this episode. But we've also had the Tedeschi Trucks Band, Shaky Graves, Allison Moorer, North Mississippi All-Stars, Scotty Barnhart, who is now the conductor of the Count Basie Orchestra, the head of the Count Basie Orchestra. We've had T. Hardy Morris. And a couple of times now, the local Tallahassee Symphony Orchestra is partnered with the headlining act to do a set together. One of my all-time favorite concert films is Ben Folds and the West Australian Symphony Orchestra. It came out in 2008 or 2007, and I never dreamed that I would get to see something like that live. But then a few years ago, Ben Folds did a tour where he was performing with the local symphony orchestras in every city that he went to, and using a lot of the arrangements that were done for that live concert, and it was really special. I do recommend, just a little tip, I don't recommend being right up front at Cascades unless you're like standing right in front of the stage. You're going to get nothing but stage noise. That's just how the place is designed. The speakers are set up, they're pointed toward the seats. They're not, and even the front couple of rows sometimes don't really catch the best sound. That being said, I also find the lawn seats to feel very disconnected from the show. So I do love getting seats at that venue. I've seen a lot of other great bands there, and I'm not going to get into that here, but seeing Ben Folds play with the Tallahassee Symphony Orchestra was really special for me. I've talked about it, and I've talked about this other band, the Flaming Lips, on another episode about nostalgia and music back when I first started this podcast. You might want to go back and check that out. We've had Gary Mormino, who is a historian that I studied quite a bit in graduate school, and even quote him on stage in one of my jokes. But he's been here. We've had a lot of different biologists and environmental writers here over the years that has been really special. Some of the other musicians we've had, Tommy Prine, Aaron Lee Tasjan. Of course, we've had George Clinton and Parliament-Funkadelic because he lives right near here. They've played a couple times in a few different ways. Had the Blind Boys of Alabama. Chuck Reese brought them here. Had Amanda Platt and the Honeycutters. And Cedric Burnside has been here before. Anyway, such an array of artists that I really enjoy. Hotel Fiction. And that's going to kind of bring me to this year. I want to talk about this. There's not an official pre-party. And we had a lot of live music going on that night. There was a free show downtown that was part of the Under the Oaks series that I did not go to because my friend and friend of the show, Taylor Hollingsworth, was playing at the Blue Tavern. And I want to first of all, I want to give a shout out to the crowd at the Blue Tavern because they were so much better than the last time he played here. If you recall, last time he played here, I talked about on his interview episode how there was a lot of people talking. And frankly, that has been a problem at a few other shows in recent times at the Blue Tavern. If you have seen some of my footage on Danny Bedrosian where George Clinton showed up, there was a lot of talking there as well. But man, did people just tune in and watch Taylor play. And so Thursday night, before all of this fest started, Taylor was playing in town, and I had just gotten off the road. I'd had a rough week on the road, some good shows, some bad shows, canceled show, just all kinds of. The road had kicked my ass a little bit. But Taylor and I grabbed dinner, and I got to say, just catching up with him and talking to somebody who is on the road so much, and he's such a hard worker and just like lets a lot of that negative stuff roll off of him. It was really inspiring, and just shout out to Taylor for helping me put some stuff in perspective there. That was nice. But man, he played a killer set. There's some videos of that on the show as well, on the YouTube channel, so check that out.
Everyone would
Also, congratulations to Taylor. He just won a Songwriters Award for Ring Around Saturn. It's one of my favorite songs of his. It's a great song. He played it at the Blue Tavern, and the video is available on my YouTube channel as well.
Tattoos are all about the way when she sings the blues. And I realize we're good together, could materialize into life forever. No more taking time, gotta get this settled and breaking in line. I'll put the pedal to the middle. Tell you what I'm gonna do. Tell your mama maybe. Crank the generator, the great Gus elevators gonna shoot us up to the moon. Put you in a rocket suit and we'll take a little dipper cruise. The ring around Saturn's not a big enough ring for you.
So caught up with Taylor, had dinner with him, saw an amazing show. It was great. Go see Taylor wherever he is. And then the next day, I'm trying to figure out whether I'm going to go see Earth, Wind & Fire as the headlining act of Word of South, or there was like a possible way where I might have been able to get a ticket to go see Jason Isbell and the Drive-By Truckers. And I think the universe just usually puts me where I'm supposed to be, because that ticket fell through, and it would have been, as much as I would have loved to be there to see the Drive-By Truckers and Jason, it would have been a slog. It would have been a really difficult drive back to get there in time for the things that I wanted to do at Word of South. So it worked out, and then about an hour before Earth, Wind & Fire started, Lee Bains called me up, and we hung out all night and watched Earth, Wind & Fire. And then I got to meet a gentleman named Worth Parker. Now, Worth Parker, some of y'all may know from the work that he's contributed to Salvation South over the years, but he also was the first thing that the Bitter Southerner ever published was an interview that he did with Patterson Hood. So I've known about Worth for a long time. I've read a lot of his stuff, and I didn't even know he was going to be here because he wasn't on a panel or anything like that. He was just here covering the event. So it was like a total surprise that I got to meet him and hang out with him. Me, Lee, and him talked for several hours after the show. Earth, Wind & Fire, man, they were great. I got to say, not a lot of original members. That's okay sometimes. I think the big difference for me when it comes to, and I've been thinking about this a lot after seeing so many Parliament-Funkadelic shows recently, which there are very few original, there's hardly any original members with that group. And then I saw Earth, Wind & Fire, and I don't know the story where they're Earth, Wind & Fire, but what I do know about Parliament-Funkadelic that I think sets them apart from so many of the other bands that don't have their original members is that all of the members of Parliament-Funkadelic were like brought up in the school of Parliament. The guys in Parliament-Funkadelic were all mentored by the original members. Danny was working with Bernie Worrell for years. Lige Curry has now been with the group for 40-something years. And Benzel, for instance, Benzel Cohen is Benny Cohen's son, the original horn player for Parliament-Funkadelic. So these guys have all been in the kind of culture of it all for a very long time. And I think when you're like brought up by those musicians, when you learned how to play by the originals, it's a lot different than just being a hired gun that's hired to play some parts. So anyway, that's kind of my little rant about that. But Earth, Wind & Fire, they were really good. They did have several original members. I think 3 of the original members. But it was like a 12-piece band. It was kind of crazy. It was a really good show though. I enjoyed it. It's one of those things where I was like, I'm really glad I got to see them. I'd never seen them before. I don't know that I'd go again, but it was a lot of fun, and I'm glad I got to see them. And like I said, the universe just puts you where you're supposed to be, because right after Word of South, Shoals Fest was announced, where, of course, Jason Isbell and the Drive-By Truckers are going to be performing Decoration Day in its entirety together. And I've already grabbed my ticket for that. So it all worked out for me in that respect. And just shout out to everybody who helped me get into a show or tried, or that's been like a thing my whole life. Is I've always had people willing to step up and help me get into the show. Thanks to all y'all that have ever done that. The next day, I woke up and went to film Danny Bedrosian's panel. Now, Danny Bedrosian is obviously the keyboard player for P-Funk. He's written a couple of books about P-Funk, but he also has comic books based on Armenian mythology that have been coming out, or that have just come out. So check that out. On the comic book panel that Danny put on this year, he moderated this panel with Brian Moss, Jim Rugg, and Olivia Franqui. At the end of it, there was a Q&A, and I asked them this.
So this is something that Jim mentioned, but it's really for all of y'all. You mentioned that when people are kids, everybody's an artist, right? Everybody, and I think that's true for music too. Everybody bangs on pots and pans or sings songs. What do you think makes that go away in so many people at such a young age, and keeps them from being whatever it is when they were younger?
Is it cool if I start?
Yeah, go.
All right, so I'll make it quick. Part of it's puberty, because people, it's like comics aren't cool, art's not that cool when there's the party around the corner, right? I discovered comics at 10, which would be considered actually late, because I'm sure everyone in this room who's into comics, you were probably born into it. You probably saw it at 3, 4, something like that, right? So when people would get out of comics, and once again, you two were told this earlier, what happens is that they move on, So for me, there would be a slight, adolescence that I still own that I keep going back to. So I never became cynical about comics. I never became jaded. And that's kind of why I kind of coast through it, because I still have that childlike enthusiasm. So me and Jamie were looking at a Superman comic yesterday, and my man was there too yesterday. And we were looking at it, and then it was a complete ripoff of Barry Windsor Smith, and we're just dying laughing. So that's the kind of whimsy that we retain for comics, you know what I mean? So yeah, that's pretty much it. I just carry that enthusiasm, and I still do the discovery. So I'll stop at an antique shop or this, and then, oh, I didn't know about this. Yo, Jimmy, you see this? Yo, Danny, you see this? Yeah, that kind of thing. So yeah, so you just keep it childlike. And it's never too late to start drawing, because comics are not predicated on skill set of drawing. It's a combination of story, words, even design today. Mm-hmm. Just get yourself an iPad, get Procreate, start out taking pictures and drawing over them, and then just build it slowly. And eventually that will turn over, mature into something larger.
I think to add on top of that, what kind of stops that childlike, that early interest and passion to pursue art or music or anything is the lack of support, not just from your immediate surroundings like family and friends, but the world at large. Because as you get older, you get past puberty, you get the support from your family. Sometimes they'll buy you that cheap watercolor kit, where everything's got it's 50% filler and grain, but it's your first ever paint kit. Or you've drawn on Xerox copy paper. I used to do the ones where they were connected on the sides,
Oh,
you
yeah.
know, that would make my first comics on that. And you grow up and people tell you this is not something that's lucrative. This is not something that's
That's what I was
like,
gonna say.
that you can't make a
Politics
job
is-
out of this.
Yes.
And, you know, it makes put a downer on that. And then, you know, you lose that support from around you and you kind of, you know, lose the fizzle of like your interest in whatever art that you started off having interest in. But if you can find a way to keep the whimsy in it, then like, you just have fun. That's what I tell myself, just have fun with it. It's not serious. You're not, you know, it's not rocket science. You're not doing brain surgery. It's comics, it's cartoons, it's music. Have something that's gonna create joy. Because if it makes you happy, it'll make somebody else happy, you know. But I think that the support, the lack of support, I think is what really crushes most people.
I think the rigidity of school for young children can be hard with art, and there's peer pressure. And I think there's also frustration. A lot of people, you know, you have an idea in your head of what you want to draw, and once it gets onto paper, it's not what was in your head, and your first instinct is to dismiss it. It's bad because it's not what I was picturing. And sometimes it might be better. Like, I would always encourage students when I taught, like, evaluate what's on the piece of paper for what's on the piece of paper and not for what the original idea was. But that can be really frustrating if you have something in mind, and it might take you 10 years to become an artist that's capable of translating that. It might take you longer than that.
Sure.
And I think that can be frustrating. You know, when you're a little kid and you draw the thing and someone's like, that's a really good rocket, and it's like, that's a house. You know, that's hard. That's hard to hear over and over again.
Yep, I meant to do that all along.
You will be able to get the whole panel as an episode of Danny Bedrosian's podcast. So please check that out. Make sure you go check out Danny on everything. There's a link in the description up here. And then after that, the sky opened up. After the sky opened up, we were a little worried. Equipment was getting wet. And Danny looked at me and he was like, I don't know, man. This looks bad. And I looked at the weather report and I looked outside. And I went out and walked around in the rain for a minute. And then I came back to Danny and I said, hey, man. This is gonna be done by the time your set's on. It's gonna be fine. And sure enough, it was. But I gotta say, I wasn't 100% sure when I told him that. I was just trying to make him feel better. But it worked. Everything was great. What a killer set. Check it out. So Danny Bedrosian and George Clinton put together a little. It was basically Danny Bedrosian's Secret Army, which is Danny Bedrosian, Lige Curry, and Benzel Cohen. The rhythm section of Parliament-Funkadelic and Danny. And then we had Patavian Lewis, who is Danny's wife, George's granddaughter. We had John Deming on guitar, who, oddly enough, is an amazing poet. And really had a great time talking to him. Hopefully we'll have him on the show soon. But he played guitar, and he killed it. It was just great. They put together a great little band for the show. It was awesome. There was some special guests. The whole thing is also going to be on Danny's podcast, Danny on Everything. We got a soundboard recording for that, so make sure you check that out. It was a great set. I really enjoyed it. And I've been seeing, I've had a lot of time around Parliament-Funkadelic lately, and it's just so great to see George. It's almost like he's got a new breath of fresh life in him. It's amazing. It's really great to see him killing it the way he is, man. I'm going to go to Jacksonville this week. They're playing a free show there, so go check that out in Jacksonville. If you're in the area, go see some P-Funk. They played all songs from 1975 from the 3 albums that the book Make My Funk the P-Funk is about. And it was a killer set. We had a lot of fun. I filmed the whole thing. It'll be on Danny's podcast. Then after that, I saw some Yonder Mountain String Band. And I got to say, I saw one of the whitest things I've ever seen. They did a cover of Tom Petty. And this phenomenon happened down front that I'd never witnessed before. It was like a circle pit of line dancers. It was something. I don't really know how to describe it. It was almost like they were skipping in a circle. I think they're probably glad I didn't film that. It was entertaining. They looked like they were having fun. I'm not trying to yuck anybody's yum, but it was the whitest thing I'd ever seen. They put on a good show, though. I think I'd seen them once before at a festival back in the day, but it's not really my thing. But they were fun. I enjoyed it. They were put on a great show. It was a good show. And it definitely provided some balance to Earth, Wind, and Fire. I do want to point out, I think Earth, Wind, and Fire is one of the first, if not the first time that we've had a black headliner. And I do notice the crowd at Word of South is not as diverse as the lineup often is. And I just wonder if there is some ways to reach those communities, because I feel like there's got to be a reason for that. Because especially when I looked at the crowd at P-Funk Fest and I looked at the crowd at the set of George Clinton at Word of South, and it was just a very different experience. And I'll just leave it at that. But the next day, I planned to spend the whole day at Chuck Reese's stage. I did check out his stage a little bit on Saturday, but I was doing stuff with Danny that day. So, like I said earlier, you can't be everywhere all at once. And thankfully, Lee was playing on Sunday. There was a poetry reading with him and Jacqueline Trimble. And I've seen Jacqueline. Jacqueline's been here before. Jackie's an amazingly talented poet. She's a laureate. I really enjoyed hearing her read poems again.
This poem is called Woman Attacked by a Bear in the Woods Near Her Home. When she emerged from the footpath, tattered, clear evidence of bear marking her face and body, neighbors knew what had happened, had seen the signs before. They were overcome with sympathy and care. Nobody wondered if her clothing had seduced the bear, invited him to slash her shirt from her body, rip her pants, leave her wounded on his way to wherever bears wander. Nobody asked why she had ventured alone on an evening stroll in a wood rumored to be inhabited by bears, knowing full well bears can be irresponsible and unpredictable. Nobody asked if she had ever dated the bear, or invited the bear to walk with her in the dark forest, or how many other bears had crossed her path and how often. Her mother did not say, "You must have done something to lead the bear on." The news reporter did not even call it an alleged bear attack. The bear's bear friends did not name her liar or worse. Social media did not come for her. Well, only a little. Nobody at all said, "Bears will be bears." Not even the wildlife rangers who told her how lucky she was to have survived. The nurse brought her extra Jell-O, stroked her hair, told her own tearful story of a bear encounter without shame or self-recrimination or one, "Please don't tell. You don't want to ruin a good bear's life, do you?" No, everybody, and I mean everybody, believed her.
It was really interesting to hear Lee read poems. I've never heard. I've read his poetry before, but I've never gotten to hear him read it, and it was really great. He's a talented guy, man. And I got to spend the weekend with him, and he's just such a down-to-earth dude. I can't wait for y'all to get to know him better when he comes on the show this fall when his poetry book comes out. I encourage you to pre-order it right now. There's a link in the description.
You know, I don't know. I mean, this is a college town, so I'm sure y'all have all run into this before. Sometimes you go to the fast food joint after closing time.
Absolutely.
And, you know, people want some French fries and, you know, burritos or whatever to soak it up. And I think that's what Rayshard Brooks was doing. He was sitting in a long line at the Wendy's waiting for his burger or whatever, and, you know, fell asleep in the driver's seat and missed. I myself have done it, and he was killed for that in the United States of America by the Atlanta Police Department. And this is I'm going to now read a song because I'm not as well. I'm not a lot of things as well as Ms. Trimble is, but one of them is I'm not as prolific a poet, but I am a pretty prolific lyricist. And so I want to read, there's a couple I could read. One's about Atlanta and MLK, but I think I'm going to do this one instead. I wrote this in part, the last album I wrote is called Old Time Folks. And it's trying to tell the story. Thank you, Matt. And it's trying to tell the story of. It's trying to be a people's history of the land that is currently Alabama and West Georgia and North Florida, where we are now. The land of the Muskogee Creek people, and it's trying to tell histories and find histories and relate to histories of people standing up for themselves and trying to create ways of living in which we can be equal and free and share abundantly. And this is the first song from that record. It's called Old Time Folks Invocation. Carry us, black warrior, through hushed thickets, holy mounds, sun-blazed fields, dead white seas of cotton, the black fog of the mills, the oil-slicked, deep-stained Gulf, so we can know and trust and feel from whom all of our blessings flow. Muskogee saints facing mechanized conquistadors and privatized troops, defending land and old souls from the priests and the suits. Tallahassee, Tulsa. Freedom is a holy old town that moves down a mean, snaky road. Black rebels gripping microphones, fountain pens, AKs, and cane knives. The barons hiding behind white hoods and red lines, hissing lies to sunburnt rabble, holding bullwhips and nines, drums in the streets and swamps growing loud. From tent villages, red brick projects, dusty co-ops, secret freedom schools, Igbo poets, Bantu scholars, rebel peasants of British rule, to white mansions and glass towers, bankers and big mules, peeking through the blinds at the churning crowd, rising up like a mighty cloud of old-time folks, old-time folks, old-time folks, old-time folks. Cherokee and Mayan survivors banging on Appalachian prison bars, communist lawyers and sharecroppers parting courthouse lynch mobs, queer angels and prophetesses walking and talking with God, Brush Arbor, street corner, briar patch. Downtown moaning sub-bass invocations, sanctified blues of conjure women, Greek priests, Muslim MCs, down-home Jews, their eyes flashing gentle and wild among the blooms of tear gas, gun smoke, and coal ash. Child, the Lord don't make no trash, just old-time folks. Old-time folks. We're just old-time folks. We're old-time folks. We ain't machines, we ain't monsters, we ain't numbers, we've got names. This ain't a brand, this ain't a look, this ain't content, it's stories. We're all stories. We're old-time folks. We're old-time folks. We're old-time. We're old-time folks.
Really pretty inexpensive, and you just got a taste of his poetry. Then after the poetry reading, Lee played his set. It was fucking awesome. It was really great to see him play in front of a big crowd in Tallahassee again. Of course, he played my house last year. We had a good turnout for that. We had a great time, but he was playing in front of a few hundred people, and it was really, I'm just so happy when my city gets to see things that I love.
I'm from the city of Birmingham, Alabama originally. How many of y'all grew up in, here like North Florida, Georgia, Alabama, and this kind of, hell yeah, that's a good contingent. Proud to see that. And I don't know about y'all, but in Alabama we have to take 4th grade history class. Is that true in Florida and Georgia?
They don't allow history.
Right, exactly. Good point. They don't allow history, my man. Well, in the 90s, we had what passed for the state of Alabama's version of history. And out of the many problematic things, as you could imagine, they were teaching us in that one Alabama textbook, one of the things that they told us was that the reason that Birmingham boomed like it did was that people in the South weren't suckers for this thing called unionism, for labor organizing. They were saying, see, that was a Yankee thing. That's things Northerners did. But down here, we knew better than that. Well, when I start digging into our real history, what I find out is that Birmingham and the Birmingham district and the wiregrass of Alabama, as well as the ports along Savannah and down in New Orleans, had a very strong history of organized labor. And that when we look at that strong history of organized labor in these places, we see the seeds of the civil rights movement. That's where the movement came from. And in Birmingham, what a lot of people don't know is that right after the Civil War, which is when Birmingham was built to mine coal and mill steel, there were a lot of people who were recently emancipated enslaved people and a lot of poor white folks who were coming to look for work in the city. And what they found out was that these companies were trying to rip them off, right? These companies were trying to pay them pennies on the dollar, and the way the company would succeed in doing that was to treat the black workers just a little worse than the white workers. And the more they would do that, the more they split up. So what the workers in the Birmingham district says, they were like, we see what y'all are up to, and what we're going to do is we're going to form a union together. And Birmingham was known as the most hostilely segregated city in the mid-century of the 20th century. But the reason for that is that in the late 1800s, there were interracial miners' unions standing up for the rights of all working people in Birmingham. In the 1880s and 1890s, people were standing together for their rights. And that's the reason that we don't send our children into coal mines anymore. That's the reason that we have ideas like the 40-hour week. That's the reason we have ideas like retirement and spring break for teachers, all these kinds of things that we can celebrate and be grateful for. This song is about standing together as people who have to work for a living. Because if I, as a white guy who have to work for a living, am not standing aside my immigrant brother who has to work for a living, or my trans coworker, or my black coworker, then I'm not standing up for myself. Am I right? Am I right? Am I right? All right, this is about standing up for ourselves.
Lee, his whole set will eventually be on my YouTube channel, From Word to South. There's a few songs up already. Really enjoyed that. And I just always have faith in Chuck. So I stuck around his stage that day. And I was just hanging out. I was definitely going to stick around for a few songs of Amethyst Kiah, but I wasn't familiar with her. But she had me completely within, I don't know, 5 minutes. So I was hooked. I was hooked on her music immediately. I was hooked on Amethyst Kiah's music immediately. I filmed her whole set as well. Here's a clip.
There's this podcast called Old Gods of Appalachia. Yeah. And it's an incredible, it's a horror anthology inspired by cosmic horror, also known as Lovecraftian horror, Cthulhu, if you know, you know. I don't know. Sometimes I try to say what the cool kids say now, and I don't know if I'm ever doing it right. Anyway. But yeah, what's so cool about this show is that usually those Lovecraftian style stories aren't normally set in Southern Appalachia, and all of the voice actors and all the creators are, they all live in either West North Carolina or Southwest Virginia, or East Tennessee. And one of the guys that writes songs for the show, or has written songs for the show, cuts my hair when I'm back home in Johnson City. Shout out to Jake. But yeah, and it inspired me to write my own cosmic horror song. So there's indoctrination and human sacrifice, things that never happened in real life, so we're good. This was called Gods Under the Mountain.
I don't know what drew me to her at first. I think it was just her authenticity. But then about halfway through, she mentioned Butch Walker. Now, Butch Walker produced her last record and was probably the first rock idol that I ever had. You've probably heard me talk about the Marvelous Three before on this show. I definitely talked about it on the Nostalgic and Music episode. This is a second part to that episode in some ways because of just so many of the artists that I talked about on that episode were at Word of South or tie into this year's Word of South somehow. But I went to the reunion shows of, you know how you always kind of wonder, okay, was this band or this movie or this book or whatever that I liked as a kid, was it good or was I just a kid? And when I went to see the Marvelous Three play their reunion shows at the Tabernacle, I was just like, all right, they were actually good. Hell yeah, that's great. And so I spent a lot more time with Butch Walker's music again over the last couple of years. Picked up a couple other records he's produced. I think one of them was a Panic at the Disco record. And really just have gotten to enjoy his production style. So when she mentioned that, I was like, holy crap, I can't believe I missed this connection. And So I bought that record immediately. I've been listening to it pretty much nonstop. And then Chuck and Amethyst and Lee were gracious enough to let me spend the evening with them, and we all had some food at the hotel, just on the patio there. And Lee, Chuck, and Stacy Reese, and Emma Lambase, Demiatrix, her music is really interesting. I encourage you to check it out. We all hung out for a while, and it was just a really fun night. But then Amethyst, me and Lee hung out like after everybody else went to bed until the hotel was shutting down operations for the hotel bar. And man, I just felt like I just really got to connect with some really amazing people. Amethyst Kiah's records are really incredible. Go see her wherever you can. And that kind of tied like a nice little bow on the weekend for me, having like this connection to the first band that I ever really loved and followed around. Like, I think I went and saw the Marvelous 3 15 times as a kid, and they broke up when I was 15 years old. I think being able to like have that connection to this thing, this like common thread through all this music that I've loved over the years, and there's a lot of them, a lot of those common threads. There's really just like a tapestry that's been woven over the years of all the music and the artists that I love. But it was really just once again, just told me I was exactly where I was supposed to be. And there was no after party for Word of South, but I do feel like the Alabama Shakes playing 2 days later was that. They played at Cascades Park. I feel like, to be honest with you, they were probably trying to get Alabama Shakes for Word of South, but the date wasn't available. And they were just like, oh, man, fine, just play the Tuesday after. It's no big deal. And they did, and it was fantastic. It was phenomenal. It was so great to see the Alabama Shakes back together again. I first saw the Alabama Shakes before their first album came out, opening for the Drive-By Truckers and Booker T on New Year's Eve. And I think everybody that was at that show knew that the Alabama Shakes were going to be one of the biggest bands of the next year. And we were right. They also opened at the Drive-By Truckers Homecoming at the 40 Watt. And then a few months later, I think that summer, my friend and I went to Birmingham. My friend Jesse and I went to Birmingham and saw them play at Sloss Furnace. And Patterson Hood was opening for them. And Jesse and I got to watch this show together at Cascades. And I don't know, there was just something that really brought it all home for me. You know what I mean? But I encourage you to support Word of South Festival however you can. Tell people about it. Buy VIP tickets if you can afford to do so next year. Whatever you can do to spread the word about this fest. I think it's one of the most important things, not only that Tallahassee does culturally, but I think it's actually really culturally significant outside of Tallahassee, and I don't think that Tallahassee produces many things that are. Not to slight my hometown, although I do it pretty often on this show. I think, here's the thing about Tallahassee. I think that if you love it, you also recognize its flaws, and it's the only way to love this city. And with that, I'm signing off. We got a lot of great episodes coming up this season. We've got my buddy Evan Rossi. We've got Sean Lubin. We've got a bunch of people. I'm supposed to sit down with Lige Curry from Parliament-Funkadelic next week. Franz Nikolai is supposed to come on the show soon as well, right after testifying for Congress in the Live Nation Act, the Live Nation case. We got a lot of exciting things going on. I'm going to be at AFFest again this year, trying to get on some comedy shows around then, so keep an eye out. I think there's a few potential dates in the Athens area surrounding AFFest that I'll be on. So keep an eye out for those to be announced. And thanks for tuning in. Welcome back to Season 4 of Overeducated and Underemployed. Take it away, Sloan.